Tony, welcome to the show. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Good to see you as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting today about enrollment and operations. And before we jump right into the meat and potatoes, can you give us the quick background on yourself, who you are, and then maybe just a couple notables on Prospect Schools? I know we have a fair number of listeners up in New York, so you're probably familiar with Prospect Schools. But for those that aren't in other parts of the country, give us just the couple highlights.
Yeah. So believe it or not, I am about 25 years deep into my career in education, been in it for a long time. And I think I've been really fortunate to be able to see the education space from different angles. I started as a teacher. I actually started as a teaching assistant in a school for multiple school students with multiple disabilities. I was a teacher in middle school for 10 years. I then transitioned in for 5 years. I was leading program and operations in an education nonprofit. And then after that, I transitioned to charter school operations. So I've been in charter operations, leading operations for three different networks for about the last 9 years. And I think it's really given me like a opportunity to engage with different people doing different work at different levels, all in the education space, which has been really cool. So I am currently the chief operating officer at Prospect Schools. We are based in Brooklyn. We have 7 schools, soon to be 9 schools. We're really excited to be launching
Congrats.
elementary and a middle school. Thank you. In the Windsor Terrace neighborhood in Brooklyn next year. So we're seven, soon to be 9 schools based in Brooklyn. We're almost going to be at 3,000 students this year. So we've been growing steadily over the last several years, and really since Prospect Schools was launched more than 15 years ago. And I think what sets us apart is that diversity is built into the DNA of our schools. We are an intentionally diverse community, which means that we strive to have no racial or ethnic majority. We want diversity across background, race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. So we really want our schools to be reflective of the broad community of New York City and Brooklyn, especially. And in a city that is so diverse like New York, but so many of the schools are homogeneous to a large degree, it's really cool. We really are excited to be able to offer a space where students can learn and grow, and like adults can work among people who have all different backgrounds.
Super cool. All right, so you mentioned going from 7 to 9 schools. That means a lot of work for the operations team. And
Yeah.
you also mentioned you guys are kind of cresting this 3,000 student milestone, hitting a certain amount of scale. And I think that's been a big conversation the last few years just around enrollment. We've had some conversations on the podcast about this, looking at different angles of enrollment. And so I was excited to unpack with you how you all have been thinking about building a culture around enrollment. You mentioned your school, really is trying to be reflective of the community in which you serve, and
Hmm.
you want your staff to be reflective of the community. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what it looks like to get that staff engaged in driving enrollment for the organization, which obviously is often the lifeblood of opening new schools. Before we get to some of the like tactical things you guys have been working on, take us back maybe a year or 2, 3 years, however far back it makes sense, and maybe just paint a picture for us about what the Prospect Schools enrollment culture looked like, maybe when you joined the organization or when you sort of identified, hey, we've got an opportunity here. Like, what was the status quo? What did things look like?
Yeah. So when I started with Prospect in January of 2022. And at that point, we were just emerging from the pandemic, still coming out of it. But Prospect Schools at that point was blessed with something that I would have been extremely envious of in some of my other roles, which was an incredible like word of mouth following.
Mm.
Since Prospect Schools launched, the families who started with us and they loved our schools, they still love our schools, they talked about our schools and shared with friends and family. The biggest driver by far of our enrollment was word of mouth and generating leads from our current families. And so because of that, it was a great benefit. But as our schools were growing, it also we were reaching the point where that was no longer going to sustain the need that we had for enrollment and recruitment across our schools. And so what it did was essentially masked a need to build some infrastructure underneath. And so we had been meeting our goals, but when I came in, it was one of the first years that we'd had an enrollment deficit, and we really needed to sort of take a step back and look at the culture shift that the both the infrastructure, the systems that needed to be put in place, and the culture shift that we needed to make across our organization. So that's sort of where we were when I started.
How did you decipher whether or not you feel like you have a people culture, I'll maybe bucket people and culture in the same category, or like a systems problem? Because I think this is really challenging sometimes, especially when things are going well, sort of naturally. When all of a sudden they're not going well, it can be difficult to decipher, is this like a cultural problem? Is this a people talent problem? Or you kind of alluded to needing to build out systems and infrastructure. How did you feel at the time, and like maybe talk us through how you thought about dissecting like what is the issue here when
Yeah.
you guys had that first enrollment deficit?
Yep. I'll start with the easy part of it. The easy part of it was the like systems and some of the infrastructure that was pretty easy to. We did not have we didn't have a robust marketing plan or marketing engagements. We didn't have a CRM or a customer relations management platform at the time. We weren't really sort of able to track our engagement data. So there were some really clear systems that just right off the top, we couldn't build it all in a day, but saw there was a need for it. When it came to our overall culture, I think it was not. I've really been thinking about it. I think as sort of a communication and I don't know, information challenge where like people all like want to do the best they can possibly do, and they want to engage in any way and support in any way they can. But I think thinking about what's unique about recruitment and enrollment, especially when it comes to schools, is it is a cycle that lasts the entire year. It has
Mhm.
so many different elements from like we have to attract new families, we've got to get out there and market, but then we need to like bring them in and engage them, and we need that we don't think about it as like sales in
Yeah,
charter schools, but it's
right.
essentially the same thing that like a sales cycle would look at is you engage, you get them. There's like the awareness and attraction engagement. So when you take it through all that entire process, you go from people who are meeting folks out on the street all the way to like that first day of school when people walk through the door and families get their first impression. And when so many hands are sort of in the mix and so many people are there, what it does is one, it means that there's almost like a diffusion of responsibility where nobody
Mhm.
sort of feels like enrollment is my job. If our schools aren't fully enrolled, it's on my shoulders and I got to figure out what's wrong because there's so many parts of the elements of the process. So I think the first thing that we wanted to tackle and I wanted to tackle was helping everyone feel like see the impact that enrollment's going to have on their role, whether they're working at the network office, whether they're a school leader, anywhere in between. Um, that if our schools are thriving at full enrollment versus like under enrolled, what is the impact and how does it impact each and every one of us? And then I think through that, then help build a sense of like personal responsibility and an awareness of how each role has a part to play. And I think it was that piece of like it was on us to have those conversations, to share some of that perspective, to give people an insight that I don't think people had those types of conversations as much in the past. And I think I was learning that as I asked questions and did my listening tours coming in, and I think that was a really interesting thing to find.
Yeah, as you were doing um, the peeling back of the onion, so to speak, on the enrollment journey, and thinking about how fragmented it can be. Did you have any maybe light bulb moments where you realized, hey, we're not really connecting the through line for people from, hey, you're a lead teacher to this is our enrollment goal as an organization. Was there any specific things that jumped out to you either about the existing recruitment and enrollment journey or just how things were being communicated across the organization? Because I'm guessing others listening to this have probably thought, ooh, I need to go dissect our own, enrollment and recruitment journey. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious if there's anything specific that as you reflect on that sticks out to
Hmm.
you.
Yeah. One of the things I think comes up for me is places where the places where processes need to be stitched together. So
Mm.
I'll explain that a little bit. There are like if we think about um, all right, here's a place I'll start.
Okay,
Can you
that's
ask me that
fine.
question again? Thanks. Okay, so I think as we look at the whole process, there are specific elements of the process that have really clear plans. Like if we think about today, we have a pretty clearly developed marketing plan of how we want to attract families. There are times though when the relationship as we step back and look at the family journey, the relationship that families have with us gets handed off from one person to another or one team to another. So, for example, school tours is a clear one. Our enrollment team, a student recruitment enrollment team that works at our network office, schedules the tours, make sure they're on our website, make sure we have Calendly set up for every one of our schools, make sure there's a portal through our website that families can RSVP and schedule. But when they actually go to the tours, they're interfacing with our school team. So it's really important that our school teams and our network team are really clear on what are the expectations for that tour? What should they look, sound, and feel like? Who should be leading these tours? How do we capture that someone who RSVP did arrive? What do we do with that information? How do we follow up with them after they arrive? So there's a need to connect the dots there. Similarly, when families actually get an offer to our schools, their primary point of contact shifts from our network team to the school team. So whereas once you were an applicant to our schools, maybe to more than one of our schools, now you have a specific offer to a specific seat at one of our schools, and it's going to be the registrar or the director of school operations from that school who becomes your primary point of contact. Those parts in the process are really crucial from the family perspective. And I really think we didn't stitch those together in the way that we needed to. And still, we continue to look at that. I think that's one of the places we can find where we may have some really good individual project plans owned by different people for different parts in the process. But how are we stitching those together so from a family perspective, it seems seamless?
Mm.
I think that's the thing. And forgive me for the long winded answer, but and then we started with looking at the family journey and stepping back when we first started looking into this and really trying to change our approach to our culture. We investigate and walk through. If I'm a parent who wants to apply to one of our schools, I want to learn about it. How do I do that? Where do I apply? What do I click on? Literally, like who's going to call me? How do I get to the next person? How long do I have to wait?
Mhm.
And I think doing that type of like in the weeds walkthrough is one of the best ways to identify where are the gaps and what would I expect as a parent.
Yeah, I think this is such good practical advice because it is not a hard thing to go do. If you're responsible for enrollment, like go call your school office or go fill out your main lead gen form and just see how hard it is to interact with your school. Go be a test student
Yes.
and experience your enrollment process. And it sounds like that's really what you guys did in stepping back and being like, okay, what exactly is the process? What's the handoff like? Where are we missing people? And it is kind of crazy. I mean, businesses do this all the time, right? Like, let's go be a lead for our business and see
Yeah.
how hard it is to transact with us. And where can we remove friction or make that experience better?
Yeah.
Um,
Secret shoppers, right? That's been a thing in
exactly.
the
Yeah. The
retail
whole
industry
show's on
for
there. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Go be an undercover boss for a day.
yes.
I want to shift a little bit to to operationalizing this. So, we talked a little bit about, okay, there's a problem. You start peeling back the layers, start trying to understand what's going on. Once you know, okay, we've got some opportunity here. We're not stitching together these pieces of the puzzle. Who's involved in that process? Like, how do you guys start to introduce new things? Who's involved in that? What did that process look like? Was it internal? Did you bring in external folks?
Yeah.
I'm sure people are curious.
Yeah. We started when I started, we did work with a consultant because I thought it was just important for us to have some expertise from the field to overlay what we're talking about with like, oh, here's actually like, let's start to build some structure around what
Mhm.
should be some of the guideposts. But the other thing we did is I convened uh, essentially a recruitment enrollment working group that we really tried to find representatives from across our organization, so we had directors of school operations, we had principals, we had members of our network team, our outreach team. We wanted to get different representatives there to help sort of have some of these discussions. One, so that, there's immediate buy-in, hopefully, when we make recommendations or start to have directives or mandates for schools to do things differently. It comes from a place of like, we had different representatives. We already got some buy-in,
Mhm.
and folks can get their colleagues bought into some of these new
Right.
structures. And then we like really started to work pretty heavily with our operations teams at schools. DSOs, director of school operations at every one of our schools, leads these processes on the ground. So really getting them and their teams involved. And I think the thing that we realized early on is this is, many people I think have this view, but like, not letting perfect be the enemy of good is, if we see that there's a need, let's just get it started. Let's make it happen. For example, like school tours, we had not early on when I came in, we realized as we were going through the customer, the family journey, that people didn't get a chance to actually step foot in our schools until they had already received an offer. So they may have applied in October or November. They won't receive an offer until our lottery happens in April. And then that's when they get to come visit our schools when it's decision time. And we knew that we had to get families into our schools much, much earlier in the
Mm,
process.
right.
So we stood up school tours. DSOs were amazing. They and their teams, they worked with their principals and their school teams, and they just started getting it rolling. Literally in the span of about 3 weeks, we were like, we have to make these happen. Here's what they should look like. Schedule some times. We're going to put it on our website. Let's go. Um, now 3 years later, we have a much more refined system. We
Sure.
have how we schedule an RSVP and what those look like. But I think it was engaging those teams directly on the ground to just stand it up, and they were the behind the scenes heroes in the process.
Yeah, yeah, totally. What would you say, like, you kinda hit the nail on the head just around, if you don't get buy-in, change management's really hard. Anytime you introduce a new, here's a new way we're gonna do things, it's, change management's often the most challenging part, and shifting mindsets is a big undertaking, especially for folks who've been with the organization for a long time. As you all started to spin up some of this, whether it be the open houses or, it's, "Hey, we're gonna be a little more intentional around this." How did you think about communicating or trying to drive the buy-in across different departments? Was it because you had the right leader in your working group, or was there other ways you all were trying to show sort of the cross-functional effort?
Yeah. Great question. I think it's a little bit of everything. We
Okay.
definitely wanted to have the buy-in by having the right people on the working group. But I think the other thing we did is we were really intentional in like letting people see behind the curtain.
Mm.
There was a little bit of like a veil of mystery of what are we doing to get kids into the school? And from like a school leader perspective, it's like, okay, April comes, lottery comes, I get my list of kids, and like, here we go. But all the things that happen from through the rest of the year to get families in the door and get students and families excited, there was some real mystery around that. So I think the first thing we did was we brought people into it much, much earlier, and we had intentional meetings. We had a new director of student recruitment and enrollment come on the team shortly after I started, and we had him meeting with principals, with DSOs, preview what's coming, give them insight into how we're marketing and what the next couple of months looks like. We also actually brought them in to like the budgeting process much,
I
much
was just gonna
earlier.
ask, I was like, did you
Yeah.
include the finance component of this? Because I do
Yes.
think it sometimes gets lost. Like, hey guys, this is our entire budget is basically baked on hitting certain enrollment
Yes.
tiers.
Totally. I I like to talk about, when um, talking about enrollment, I really share that one, our enrollment is the way we fulfill our mission. We
Mhm.
believe every school believes that, you exist because it's good for kids and you want and you need kids in your classrooms to like that's why we exist. So it's the fulfillment of our mission. It is also our lifeblood, literally, our financial lifeblood. We every charter school I've been a part of, it is built into the mission to exist on the public dollar and really show that. And certainly that there is an element of philanthropy, but it does not fund our core programming in our schools. So it really is, it's the per pupil funding that we rely on. And so again, to that, like when it talked about at the beginning, the education piece, just people understanding, I think um, I know I took for granted the insight that people had into how closely connected enrollment to budget to staffing to the things that
Mhm.
we're able to do and the decisions we're able to make around our staffing and programming. So it was also that we brought school leaders into that part of the process much, much earlier.
Yeah, and it's easy to take for granted, right? Especially if you're part of the leadership team or the C-suite or you've been in if you've been in the game a long time, like
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's easy to forget at a certain point you learn this, especially because so many of the leaders in the space are teachers who just kind of came up through through the organization and a lot of times PD is not necessarily focused on, okay, we are going to now teach you how to read or build a financial model and how here's all our different funding sources and here's how
Yep.
we have this multi-tiered approach to per pupil revenue. Like that just doesn't get coached on as often as it probably should. And so I think that's a really good call out just on, it's easy to forget all of our people don't necessarily see the big picture that, me sitting in the board meeting or sitting next
Yep.
to our CEO that I get. What would you say, you've talked a lot about part of this was just peeling back the layers of the onion, starting to implement some like immediate changes, getting buy-in from different departments, trying to be transparent. At what point did you layer on technology or like upgrading systems? Because you mentioned that earlier, like not having a CRM or not really having a whatever customer marketing platform. At what point in the improvement cycle did you say, okay, we've sort of done the low hanging fruit things and now we
Yeah.
want to invest in layer on technology? I'd be curious to hear a little more on that.
Yeah. If you think about it as three phases. Phase one, which I think lasted probably the first sort of 6 months, that was let's get the working group together. Let's peel back the onion, the layers. Let's look under the hood and take a look and find out the things that we can do. And phase two, which was about, if we think about, I started in 22. So it was the 22-23 school year. So I started in the middle of 21-22. So it was pretty soon after we started to build out the sort of first element of the technology and the systems we were going to use, which is like based in like our website. Let's start there.
Right.
And we made some upgrades to our website, to the family experience. We made it much easier. All the like literally how many clicks do you have to make
Yeah.
to get from like
Cut it down.
entry
Cut it
to
down. Cut it down. Right.
to application? Yes, cutting down the number of clicks. We embedded RSVPs and portals to schedule opportunities to get into our tours and information sessions and open houses. So it was really like building out our infrastructure there. And then in phase three, which was the following year, 23-24 school years, when we started to build out our use of Calendly as like a big as a tool. And then this previous year, we added HubSpot as the CRM that we're
Cool.
using, and that can really now our IT team has been working really hard to connect all of our systems. So we have our SIS, our student information system. So we can now with like from Schoolment, so a lot of all the different platforms that schools have to work with. Schoolment is the application platform. So how families first come in, then they transition to RSIS when they are a student. And now HubSpot can be the thing that captures everything. It connects to Calendly, to Schoolment, to IC, which is our SIS. So we can like get the full experience now from, we haven't had it long enough, but really from discovery when families first meet us all the way through to when they're an alumni of our schools, and we can stay connected with those families and truly see the journey. So it was like, I think that those two phases, first phase was starting with our
Hmm.
website and the tools that we already had at our disposal. Let's make them
Right.
better.
What can we
Let's
do
make
right
them,
away?
yeah, let's make them work better for us and for our families. And then the sort of next phase there was layering on the other pieces, especially HubSpot, sort of the cap on it. And then within that, we've been plugging into some marketing elements, more social media marketing, certainly using like the Meta platforms and things like that to engage more directly and see sort of our engagement stats, Google Analytics, stuff like that.
Super cool. Okay, so that's the all the platforms talking to each other. That's kind of the fully baked engine that you can now tweak the dials on and continue to experiment and move into new marketing categories. But as you mentioned, it sort of is a journey to get to that point, and it doesn't have to start with that, like which I think is
Yes.
an important takeaway. As you all worked across these three phases or the arc of your journey in making changes with enrollment, I'm curious what it probably wasn't all sunshine and roses. I'm curious what hurdles you ran into, or maybe some things that you felt like we really had to navigate through this. Like change is always challenging. As you reflect on kind of where you guys are now, 3 years later, what would you say are maybe a couple of the notable hurdles that you ran into, or maybe you're
Yeah.
still working on?
Yeah. Great question. I think a lot of it is rooted in the sort of worldview and perspective of people sitting in different seats. When you are in a school, it is a world of like today, right now, and I like principals care, rightfully so. Certainly, they're looking to the future and planning ahead, but they need to make sure that there is high quality instruction happening in every single classroom for every kid every day, and that is their like understandably their worldview and what they care most about. And certainly for DSOs and operating the school. For others who are a little bit one or two steps removed from the school, working at a network office or even a consultant, enrollment and recruitment especially is like an investment in the future. You're going to have
Mhm.
an
Right.
event in October to engage families who may apply to get an offer in April, and then will be showing up maybe at school next September. So it's all looking forward. So I think one of the real challenges is when those worldviews collide. And we've got to ask people at the school level to take time out of their day
Right.
when they are doing really, really important work every day. So to take time out and make sort of these investments in things that won't come to fruition, may never come to fruition. And
Mhm.
if they do, certainly won't for months and months into the future. And I think that's the piece that so it means that our folks who are a little bit removed need to like make sure we are giving much like lot of planning time. Let's talk about
Mhm.
things well in advance. Let's make sure we share the why and talk about why this is so important. And let's make sure we listen and understand what are the challenges and the needs from our schools so that we're not imposing things onto them that like are unreasonable expectations. And I think we have been finding ways to put those things together. But I think that's one of the challenges that really we needed to overcome and will still sometimes come up. Um,
Sure.
and so
Yeah,
we sort of keep having to think through that.
yeah, I think that's probably an ongoing one, for a lot of networks that operate, multiple campuses and are growing. Well, brag on yourselves a little bit, because I'm sure people are wondering, okay, you put in a lot of time, energy, and effort. You had an enrollment deficit. what are the tangible results you can speak to? What are some of the things you guys are encouraged about, right?
Yeah. Thank you for that opportunity. It is, we are like, I think a lot of people would probably share the view that we don't brag on ourselves as much as we probably harp on and think about the things that are challenging still for us. But I am really proud. We have seen consistent enrollment growth since that first year when I came in. Double digits the first year. We had 10% enrollment growth, and we've had about 8 and 7% respectively over the following 2 years. We've also been seeing much greater, I mean, certainly much more than when I started, when we had very little engagement of families coming into our schools over the course of the year. But we've seen steady growth over the last 3 years as well in the number of people who are signing up for tours, engaging
Mm,
in our information sessions, engaging at different points throughout the process. So we've opened up office hours with our enrollment team. So we really can track, and now with HubSpot can make it even more clear, the number of interactions that a family has had over the course of their engagement from when they're a prospective family all the way to when their student is enrolled. So we've seen that steadily grow year over year, is the engagement throughout the process. But it is the bottom line that we continue looking at. That doesn't mean that every one of our schools is fully enrolled, knocking it out of the park.
sure.
One of the benefits of having a 7 and soon to be 9 school network is we can look at it from a global view, and we're going to have really strong enrollment in some places that can balance out
Right.
where we need to grow in others. But the rising tide really does lift all boats, and we can take best practices from one school to another as we continue to learn more about some of the individual needs of even our specific schools and neighborhoods they serve in Brooklyn.
Super cool. Yeah, super cool. Okay, so if there's another chief operating officer or school leader who has enrollment kind of stuck in
Yeah.
their world of ownership, and they're going to embark on a similar journey, what's maybe the single most important piece of advice or lesson that you feel like you've learned that you would encourage others? Like if you had the time machine and could go back to 2021 Yoni or 2022 Yoni and save yourself a little bit of heartache, what would be the advice?
Yeah. If I can cheat, I'll have two. I,
Two
I
is
think
great.
the first is ask all the questions and check assumptions, and that especially if you're coming from one network to another,
Mm,
and you're trying to solve problems, you're likely going to find that they're different culture, different understandings, different information, different practices. So I really knew, I found pretty quickly I needed to check some assumptions, ask a ton of questions, and then really start to find that's when you can peel back the layers. And then I think too, I mentioned it earlier, but don't be afraid to throw some stuff at the wall. Don't try to you don't necessarily need the perfect plan before you get things up and running. Because I think sometimes we may underestimate the talent and capacity of the people on our teams who can take something and run with it pretty quickly. That doesn't mean just throw a bunch of stuff at them and turn your back and say, off you go.
yeah.
But I think it also means people want to get involved and make things happen. And you can always see if they're working. If they're not, you can shift things out.
Yeah, totally. I was thinking about that when you talked about how we had a team meeting and like 3 weeks later we had an open house. I think it's a great example of like let's not let perfect be the enemy of the good. Like let's get out there and we'll get some
Yes.
real world data that we can come back to our team huddle instead of like over whiteboarding this, which I think certainly ops folks can attest. It's easy to want to design the perfect system instead of just getting started and getting that iteration cycle going. We always ask all our guests at the end of an episode if they have any recommended resources or tools. You mentioned a number of things you guys are using today on like the enrollment tech stack side, but I'm curious if there's any other places or resources we can send people in the show notes that you found helpful on your enrollment journey.
We engaged with VChief when I first started and knew this something they have access to experts in the field, and connected us to someone who is really, really strong and had great experience, particularly in New York City. Um, so I think it is like look to the local agencies and the experts who are there. And I would really encourage people to, if you're not using a CRM, think about HubSpot, think about another. I know Salesforce, and there are some big names out there, but it really has been a game changer for us.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah, we'll link to both of those in the show notes. Our team at BuyQ uses HubSpot, so we're biased. We're big HubSpot fans. And if people want to learn more about prospect schools or connect with you, where should we send them? School website,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, anywhere else?
Yeah. Prospectschools.org. Please visit and check us out, particularly if you're in Brooklyn or in New York City. You can find me on LinkedIn. Search my name. I'm there. I'd love to be able to connect. If anyone has follow-up questions, shoot me a message, and I'd love to be able to engage.
Cool. Well, Yoni, thanks so much for your time today. I know it's a busy time of the year and really appreciate you coming on the show.
Absolutely. Daniel, thanks so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to Charter School Insider. This show is brought to you by BuyQ, the group purchasing organization specifically for charter schools. Want to learn how to maximize your school's purchasing power? Join together with thousands of other charter schools by visiting buyq.org/sign-up. BuyQ's purchasing program is free and has no obligations or commitments required. If you enjoyed today's episode, do us a favor and subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. If you have a question or feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at podcast@byq.org. Thanks, and we hope you'll tune in for the next one.